positive perspective. So if we go to the next slide, we could see that we talked about 3 topics. The first one was the grumpy attitude. The second one was the sullen attitude. And today we're going to be talking about maintaining a positive outlook. So to read again, the verses that I chose for this whole section, this whole chapter, it's going to be in Ephesians 4:31-32, and it reads, "Never be bitter, angry, or mad. Never shout angrily or say things to hurt others. Never do anything evil. Be kind, loving to each other. Forgive each other the same as God forgave you through Christ." So last week, I kind of broke it down with you guys. I think I've been breaking it down, but going back to the verse, the first part was, having the grumpy attitude, which was never be bitter, angry, or mad. And then the second part was going to be the sullen attitude, which was never shout angrily or say things to hurt others. Never do anything evil. And this week, we're going to focus on being kind and loving to each other, right? Because that's what we're supposed to do. And then forgive each other the same as God forgave us through Christ. So let's recap. So we talked about the grumpy attitude. If we could see the next slide. I'm back with my pictures, right? So we saw this one the first week, 3 weeks ago, which was the grumpy attitude. And the next one, which is the grumpy cat. So that's a representation of when you're grumpy, right? I don't know how many of you guys get grumpy. I get grumpy. And I kind of look like that when I get grumpy. And then we talked about the sullen attitude, which was the pouting, right? Because we talked about King Ahab and how he didn't get his way, so he pouted. And his wife was like, "Why are you doing this? Why are you not eating? Why aren't you getting up?" Because he was pouting because he didn't get what he wanted. So the sullen attitude could be seen in this aspect as pouting. Sorry. The next one is maintaining a positive outlook, what we're going to be talking about today. So optimism is things happen for a reason. Guy number 1. Pessimist, things are random and meaningless. Let's not be the middle person. And it says me, what things? Nobody told me about anything. So me is saying that sometimes we don't know what's going on. And then the next one, it says, every day may not be good, but there's something good in every day. So as we maintain this positive perspective, let's look at that picture and see the joy. Like, I love the rain. I don't know how many of you guys love the rain. Maybe I don't like driving in the rain, but I enjoy the rain itself. Before it rains, it smells really good. You could tell it's going to rain. And also with rain, it brings like refreshness, right? It cleans out the streets, it cleans out stuff. So, maintaining a positive perspective with it. So let's start this chapter. So maintaining a positive perspective. So it's a way of thinking. If we could go to the next slide, please. It's a way of thinking positively rather than negatively, right? So when you think of positiveness, it's always good. It's never negative. And it doesn't have to be through the rose-colored glasses. I don't know if you know what that means. Do you guys know what rose-colored glasses means? It's kind of like a honeymoon phase. Have you heard of that phrase? When you're like barely going out, everything's lovely. You love everything about that person. So that aspect of the rose-colored glasses is the same thing. You see everything so dandy. So, oh my gosh, like I love this, I love that. But maintaining a positive perspective doesn't mean everything's going to be like that, so rosy or peachy, perfect. But it's being realistic. Or not being realistic about the trials of life, but it's also about looking for the good and opportunities in situations rather than the bad. So it's not saying that life is going to be perfect, right? Because life isn't perfect. We aren't perfect ourselves. But it's maintaining a positive outlook on the situations of life. Sometimes we go through things like I don't know the type of day you have. Maybe you had a nice day. Maybe you had a bump in the road, like maybe you had a flat tire. You never knew you were going to get a flat tire. But let's keep that positive perspective. Or something that always happens to me is that for some reason I'm always running late. And I'm like, oh man, like today was the day I was going to leave super early and something happened, right? But then you go on the road and you realize that when you get on the freeway or something, there was a huge accident, you know? So having that positive perspective would be saying that, oh, you know, thank God that whatever happened that made me late because maybe I was going to be involved in that accident, right? I see that a lot. It happens to me a lot. Maybe not as much anymore because I don't drive to work anymore. I work from home. But before, I used to see it all the time. Like, oh man, today I wanted to get to work early. Like, I was going to be there. And something happened. But that's because God protected us, you know, from the situation that was going on. But when those situations happen, this chapter is going to talk about having that perspective, you know, having that positive view. Because sometimes we get mad and we don't see it on God's side, like, oh, God was protecting me from, you know, getting hurt or this or that, being in the wrong place at the wrong time. So we're going to read Romans 8, chapter 8, verse 28, and it says, we know that in everything God works for the good, for those who love him. These are the people God chose because that was his plan. So we have to focus, you know, positivity doesn't mean perfect, but it means seeing the opportunity in things. So anything that happens to you, bad in a sense, God is going to turn it into a good thing, you know. You always have to learn. Sometimes we don't see the purposes behind situations, you know. Sometimes it's just too much, you know, to understand at that moment in time. But with time, God reveals his purpose, or God reveals, you know, the growth that you're going to have with those situations. So maybe next time that you're late and you realize, oh, God, you know why I'm late, but I'm not, don't justify it, you know, just don't be like, oh, Sister Tracy said that because I'm late is because God is protecting me. No, but there's times where it happens, you know, when you're like, oh my gosh. But always remember that everything works out for the good. And so today we're going to be talking about a character in the Bible. The author talks about Abraham. She actually uses the Bible verse that we're going to be reading later on. You could go back on him. So I don't know if you guys remember who Abraham is. Do you guys remember who he is? He's kind of like practically in the first part of the Bible, right? So Abraham was said to be the father of multitudes. But what is he really known for, Abraham? There's like one particular story. Well, there's two particular stories that he's known for. One of them was that he was a very old person that had children, right? And the other one was when he did have the son, Isaac, he had to sacrifice them, right? So that's what we know him for. But today we're going to focus on him having the children with Sarah. So if we could go to the next slide. So we're going to be reading Romans 4:19 to 21. And this talks about a little bit of that, of what Abraham and Sarah went through and how they maintain a positive perspective. At first, it wasn't as positive, because they were older in age. And let me see, they were older in age, but they still believed that they could. At first, they were like, oh, Lord, do you think we could have children? But then the Lord blessed them with them. But also, Abraham did something he wasn't supposed to do because he jumped the gun. He took matters into our own hands. And this is what happens, when we take matters into our own hands, we divert from God's purpose. So let's read this verse. And it says, Abraham was almost 100 years old. So he was past the age of having children. Also, Sarah could not have children. Abraham was well aware of this, but his faith in God never became weak. He never doubted that God would do what he promised. He never stopped believing. In fact, he grew stronger in his faith and just praised God. Abraham felt sure that God was able to do what he promised. So that's admirable, right? Being 100, almost 100 years old. How many people do you know are almost 100 years old? A couple people? Grandparents? Great-grandparents? A patient? Okay, yeah, patients. We work with patients all the time, right? Or maybe grandparents or tatarabuelos or tataratios. I don't know what they're called, but they're the older generation, where our generation tends not to live that long anymore because life changes, and the perspectives of life. But Abraham was almost 100 years old. So was Sarah, I believe, right? Sarah was about the same age. I think so, yeah? No? She was around the same age. But they couldn't have children anymore. But he trusted in God, that he knew that God had made him a promise. And so it was there. God gave him 2 children, right? So that's why Abraham he wasn't only called the father of multitudes, but he was also known for his faith. He never lost his faith in anything. He always believed in God. He was the greatest, the man with the greatest faith. So if we go to the next slide. Okay, so maintaining a positive outlook requires not only faith, but mental discipline. And this can be hard because, as I wrote there, it says, what happens most of the time is that you believe in God. It's in control with your life, right? But oftentimes the reality of the situation, whatever the situation you're going through, sometimes overwhelms your mind. And so it's not saying that you don't have faith, but you start kind of doubting that, that God will do something. And so maintaining a positive perspective is not only you having faith in God, but also you creating that in your mind. Not always, like we were talking about the grumpy attitude and the sullen attitude. It's a choice. You need to choose to do differently. I know there's situations or circumstances that come up that are, really hard to deal with or understand, but in that, you have to learn how to be mentally disciplined. Just like anything else, you have to be disciplined, physical wise, or, like if you want to achieve a goal, you have to be disciplined, right? You can't just like say, I want to, be a successful like businessman. You have to start from zero, but also that means you have to be disciplined, right? You can't be getting up at 12 p.m. You can't be getting up, letting your responsibilities go, but you have to be disciplined. And the same thing goes with a positive perspective or outlook in life. You have to change your mentality and be like, okay, I'm going to be optimistic, this is going to be this way, and I'm going to choose to see the good in everything. It goes with people too. Like, there's some people, and it's going to go on, I'm going to show you later that, but, it says loving your, like, annoying relatives or people. It's not saying, again, it's not labeling them, but it's seeing a good side. Okay, this person, even though they're so annoying, they have a purpose. God made them for a reason, and let's look at that. Sometimes it's hard to see that because some people tend to get annoying, but you have to see the positive in everything that you do and that you see in people. Could we go to the next slide, please? So what we have to do is that we have to develop, right? We said we have to be mentally disciplined. So we have to develop that skill. And that we could find it in 2 Corinthians 10:5, and it says, we demolish argument and every pretentious that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and take captive every thought to make it in obedient to God. So every thought that we have, it has to be obedient to God, you know? Again, everything's a choice. We need to decide to think like Christ. And we need to learn how to let our thoughts be, Christ driven. So as we stop these negative thoughts, fix your thoughts on what is true, what is honorable, right, pure, lovely, and admirable. Think about things that are excellent and worthy of praise. And that's in Philippians chapter 4, verse 8, and it's kind of paraphrased. But that's how we change our thoughts, We have to think of what's good, what's honorable. We can't think about, like, say we're talking about this annoying person or relative. We can't wish that person wrong because it's not honorable. It's not what Christ would do. Christ wouldn't agree with that. God wouldn't agree with that. So whatever we do, it also goes back to the things that we see, the things that, the people that we hang out with. If you're going to hang out with people who aren't so positive, then you're going to start becoming that person. You're going to be becoming negative instead of you impacting that person. We always think we could change people. And let's get this, in our minds, we can't change people. The only person that could change a person is God. And the person needs to want to change. So we can't hang out with a negative person thinking we could change them. It's not going to happen. What ends up happening most of the time is that we become negative people. So we start, getting their traits and being that type of person. So, and it goes back to, that's why we say with relationships, you shouldn't be dating outside of the church, outside of Christianity, because they don't believe what you believe. And even though you think you're going to bring them to church, most of the time it doesn't happen. So it does happen. Don't get me wrong, it does happen. But most of the time, Sister Myra and I have been here for 20 plus years in this church, and we've seen opposite. We've seen, good. I'm glad you stick with us, But we've seen the opposite side of that. And so I think we talk about all these things because we have experience, and we don't want you to go through it. But like I said, I'm happy that you're here, But so if we go on to the next one, I went blank. Okay. So the amount of stress you experience in a situation will determine your attitude towards what is happening, right? So if you're really stressed out about a situation, it's either you snap or there's no feeling, right? But we want to learn to be that there's a between, right? You know how the meme says there's like no in between? Let's have an in between, because we can be explosive with all the situations that don't go our way. We got to learn that, because as we become adults, there's a lot of more uncertainties or unfairness, if that's a word, in the work environment. You're gonna think you're this way, but your boss thinks a completely different way. And who's gonna stress out? You. Your boss doesn't stress out, right? And te enojas y que ganas con enojarte. You still gotta work, right? It goes to my other meme, right? Where you get annoyed with your coworker, but what you gonna do? You still need to pay your bills, but check your stress levels, Also, sometimes the stress doesn't come from the situation. It comes from other stuff. Like maybe it's piling up from other situations. So that's where we need to figure out where our stressors come. So an example I put there is if you start with your overwhelming feeling/emotion, then your attitude will be negative. But if you maintain that God is in control, then you will prevail. So what this is saying is that instead of you placing yourself and, always place God first. I think that was one of the things we talked about in the first lesson, where you start your day with God. Have you guys tried it? So ever since I tried it, do you see a difference in your day? I know I do. Sometimes I'm like, oh shoot, I need to turn my computer on. Y se me olvida. And I'm like, ¿por qué no me está saliendo nada bien? And then I realize, I'm like, oh shoot, I didn't pray. But then I go back and I pray and I correct it and my day gets better. But so when you're having an overwhelming sensation of stress or in a particular situation, don't get too caught up in trying to fix it yourself. Put God, give it in God's hands. I know sometimes some of us have control issues, and we can't just, here, God, take care of my situation, because you want to do something about it. But in a sense, we're not, because we're going to end up getting mad or doing something that we're not supposed to. Like we saw Moses in the last lesson, where like he was just supposed to speak to the rock, but he didn't. He hid it. And so before we get to that problem, then let God take control of it. Let him fix the situation. And like I said last time, it's not instant. Some situations aren't instant. Sometimes we have to keep praying and praying and praying until God does his will. So, okay, next slide. So it says, check yourself, right? So how many of you guys made this line? And back to the 2 years that we've gone through this COVID thing, right? I did. How many of you guys like lines? I know one person here that hates lines, and I won't point her out. But, it says, be your own police, your attitude police. So start, realizing or checking yourself when you're in these difficult situations. Start checking yourself out to be like, okay, what is triggering this emotion? What is triggering that emotion? Why do I feel so stressed out? Or, find the triggers. So start noticing how you respond to stressful situations. And the first one I put was long lines, like the picture. And if somebody knows me well, knows that I love stuff like this. I don't mind making lines. Why? Because I start talking to everybody. I make friends with everybody. I'm just that type of person. They don't even like to go with me to the grocery store because I start talking to everybody. So, that's not my problem. But for some of you guys, that is your problem. You get to like, where am I going to get to the front? When am I going to get my food? Like, remember how like, okay, COVID, 2 years ago, whatever, like the fast food lanes were like around the corner. I know I went to this place called what is it called? It's a fish taco place. And the line was like ridiculous. And I'm like, oh, that's okay. I don't think I want that. But, for some people, that's a trigger. That's something that like they, road rage status where they'll just cut you off and you're like, excuse you, like we were waiting here for hours. And then it turns into a mess, right? Because I feel like, how you ask for prayer about the school, what's going on in school now. I think that's what's happening now. Like anything's a trigger and everything triggers anybody. But another thing I put there, it's undesirable weather. So for some people, like hate the heat, right? You get like super like cranky and da-da-da. So you have to start checking to see what stresses you out. Another one was impossible, I called them annoying, but impossible relatives or people. That could be a stressor too in certain situations. And in any other negative situations, anything else that triggers you. So check yourself when you start getting this attitude, this negative attitude. Check to see what's triggering it. And try to change that perspective, So if you go to the next one, it says, how to get a positive mind. So the author always gives like pointers on how to work on things. So I found them interesting. It says, the first one would be, watch who you're hanging out with. Attitudes are contagious. I think I talked about that a little earlier. Attitudes are very contagious. Say we're having a good time and then Haley comes and she's having a bad day. She's gonna ruin our day, right? Or she's gonna not ruin it, but she's gonna bring us down. It's not gonna be the same. Or say Andrew, it's like we're hanging out and Andrew comes and he had a situation, then we're kind of like walking on eggshells because we're like, oh, he's not having a good day, or he might explode on us or something like that. So I'm not saying you're not going to have those days with people and, with friends. If you have best friends, then you could talk to them about it. But when it starts, it's a problem when it starts becoming a habit, when your attitude is always like that. And then you don't want to hang out with those people because you're like, oh, they're going to bring me down, like, like I feel like I need to be careful what I say. So watch what you hang out with because attitudes are contagious. And to put it on a positive side, when you're like happy and excited, that's contagious too. When you're like laughing at something, somebody else is gonna laugh, right? Say you watch a funny video, you're gonna crack up because the other person is cracking up. So attitudes are very contagious. Number 2 is regularly read the miracles of the Bible and make full use of the men and women of faith. So to maintain a positive mindset, you have to read your Bible regularly, That's the only way we grow. That's the only way we can have a positive perspective. And number 3 is prayerfully consider change. So like I said before, if you don't want to change, you're not going to change. But if you ask God to change you, he's going to change you. And you can't change others, and other people can't change you. So unless you want to change, you have to make that decision. And prayerfully. So number 4 is know that pessimism is an insult to God. It is an indication of your lack of faith in him to make matters better. So pessimism is just being a negative person, right? So that's an insult to God because with God we have faith, right? Faith that, we have faith that we're going to wake up tomorrow. That's optimism. But a pessimist person is just a never happy person. So try not to be a pessimist. Be an optimist. Have that faith in God. Even if your situation gets bad or whatever the circumstance you're going through, always trust that God's going to take you out of that situation and he's going to make it better. And number 5 is consider how your attitude impacts your witness for Christ. So this one's very important because I know most of us have friends that don't come to church, right? And sometimes we kind of mess up, right? Because we're having a bad day and they see us and they're like, oh, well, I thought you were a Christian. I think that's the worst thing they could tell you. Oh, I thought you were a Christian. I thought you went to church. And it's like, oh, I'm sorry. Like I said, we're not perfect, but that's what it means, Consider how your attitude impacts others. And also it impacts within your family, like your parents, If you're going to be acting like up all the time, like what is that telling you? Like you need to change that too. And so the next one. So a positive attitude will only minimize how stress affects you, but also it has a direct correlation to how our bodies respond to sickness. So when you have a positive attitude, you tend to be a lot more healthier. So there's no stress, you don't feel sick, you don't feel that, you always feel like the energy and the endorphins and all that stuff. But also, it's interesting because she wrote something there how like terminally ill patients, like cancer at their last stage, if they maintain a positive attitude, they tend to beat it sometimes, or they tend to have a better perspective, And so they're in a better like space. But if you're not positive, then, I think I've seen it in different like studies or stuff that you study in school where, like, say a patient gets diagnosed with cancer. If they don't do nothing about it, they pass away faster than the person that's like, hey, I'm going to beat this. I'm going to do all that I can and have that positive outlook. And they tend to beat it, And so that's what she was talking there. And so our body reacts, if you get really stressed out, your hair starts falling out, right? I don't think you've noticed that. I hope not. But like stress, or you don't sleep well, and that affects a lot of other things. So have a positive attitude so it minimizes, the effects on the body. And Proverbs 14:30 says, "A peaceful heart leads to a healthy body." So, like I said, I like the rain. So, look at the happiness in the rain. That's me. So, every time it rains, think about me. No. But, have a positive outlook and stuff, instead of saying, "Oh man, it's so cloudy again." Be like, "Oh, it's really nice out. Like, let me take a walk. I could actually walk without getting the sunburn. Like, have a positive perspective on things. Like I said earlier, maybe you have an inconvenience in time and you're late. Thank God, because you don't know what was going to happen in that trajectory, that if you left early, this was going to happen. God knows why he does things, and God knows why, things happen, but God always protects us. So I'm going to leave you with the verse again. So I hope you guys memorized it by now. But it says, never be bitter, angry, or mad. Never shout angrily or say things to hurt others. Never do anything evil. Be kind and loving to each other. Forgive each other the same as God forgave you through Christ. Ephesians 4:31 and 32. So always remember this. Anger never leads to anything good. We saw it in Moses. Because he got so fed up with everything that was going on, he let his stress get the best of him. So then he didn't get his promise. So be kind, be loving, have a positive perspective in everything that you do. Even though if it's tough, have that positive perspective and try to be around people who are positive. And also, I have a quick video for you guys. I hope you guys like it.
Let me tell you a little bit about what's going on.
Okay.
These surveys that we gave you, they're designed to measure basically how happy you are. You scored a perfect score, higher than anybody that we've given this test to since we've been doing this. It's really quite remarkable.
Good.
I think we're all anxious to know, why do you think that is?
Well, I'll give you a very brief little summary of what I do every morning when I wake up. I wake up and I say, this day I choose to be happy, well, and complete. That's first. I thank God for letting me get up. Then I thank God for the fact that I have running water in a toilet. I have soap. I have toothpaste. There are people in the world who don't have any of those things. And for food. Because sometimes we get them, I don't think I can make it today. I don't think I'm going to. But we have to realize that we are truly blessed. Then I thank God for peace in my house. I have a peaceful house, and I meditate. And then after I meditate and have my prayer, I just say, okay, God, how may I serve you today, and who can I help today? And finally, I watch cartoons. And when I watch the cartoons, I wait for the answers, I just ask. And that's a very happy, beautiful day for me. Because I don't have any, cartoons never have a problem. There's always an end to it, right? Something good happens at the end. And I have several cartoons that I watch until my day begins. And so therefore, I don't have an attitude. I'm glad to be here.
I think you just told us in 2 minutes more than any of the studies we've looked over have. So I'd really like to thank you for coming in today and just generally doing fantastic work for helping out the children that you do and for having a fantastic attitude. Thank you so much for coming in, Mama.
It's my pleasure. You should watch cartoons.
I do.
Yeah, oh, good.
What's your favorite?
Oh, my favorite is Clifford the Red Dog.
Clifford the Big Red Dog, Adventure Time for me. You should check it out. It's great.
So watch Clifford, if you know what Clifford is, because Clifford is like, yes, it's a classic. You're calling me old by calling me classic. No, just kidding. But having a positive perspective, you know, there's another video of her, and she was paralyzed for a while. She had a huge surgery where she was paralyzed, and then she was there already walking. So just to tell you, you know, you go to certain situations, but you got to let God, you know, you got to put everything in God's hands, and He's going to do something better with whatever you're going through. So that's it for our lesson tonight, and I hope you guys learned something. You know, I did. I'm still working on those things that we've talked about, but I hope that you guys learned something. Do you want to add anything, Sister Myra? You're good? Sister Amy? Just wanted to call you out. But, okay, so we're going to move on to our